Bischoff, I try to forgive him. And then I see like that documentary they did on me, and he brings up the example of why he had to fire me for a year and sent me home. With him and me, he couldn't get rid of me.
Some people call him the worst. Some people call him the greatest of all time. Ric Flair is a 16-time World Heavyweight Champion, Hall of Famer, the Nature Boy. And in April 2026, he got himself banned from WrestleMania 42. Not because of anything that happened in a ring, because he picked up a phone, called a current WWE superstar, and threatened to beat the shit out of him. That superstar was Ludwig Kaiser. Kaiser told Triple H Flair lost his credentials and could not attend. Then, on the very same week, Flair went on the Ariel Helwani show and attacked two more people, Dutch Mantell, Stevie Richards. Nobody asked him to, he just did it. If you are enjoying this story already, use the hype feature right now and give hype to this video. It keeps the channel going and helps more people find stories like this one. This is not a new version of Ric Flair. This is who he has always been. A man who keeps score. A man who does not let things go. A man who believes his legacy gives him the right to say what he wants, when he wants, about whoever he wants. And the moment someone challenges that legacy, whether it happened last month or 35 years ago, the response is always the same. Sharp, fast, unfiltered. What follows is the definitive list of 10 wrestlers and figures that Ric Flair will never forgive, backed by his own words, every single entry. Before the countdown begins, it helps to understand how Flair's anger works, because there are clear patterns. When you see them, the list stops being 10 separate stories. It becomes one long story about one man. The first trigger is a challenge to his legacy. Flair spent decades being the standard, the man every promoter pointed to, the gold bar every wrestler was measured against. When someone questions that, even slightly, he does not debate it. He destroys it. The second trigger is an insult to his family. Charlotte Flair is not just his daughter. She is part of the legacy he built. Come after her, and you come after him. The third trigger is disrespect to the craft of wrestling as Flair defines it. He has a very specific idea of what wrestling should be. Long matches, technical skill, psychology, story in the ring. If you fall outside that definition, he does not respect your career, and he will say so. The fourth trigger is a power move, someone trying to push him aside, bury him, or erase him from the picture. That wound does not heal. Not ever. Every name on this list fits at least one of those 4 triggers. Most fit more than one. Keep them in mind as we go through the countdown. You will see them come up again and again. We start with the most recent and work our way back through time. Number 10 on the countdown is Dutch Mantell, April 2026. Ric Flair is on the Ariel Helwani show. Nobody brings up Dutch Mantell. Nobody asks Flair about it. The topic does not come up naturally. Flair just decides to go after him, completely without prompt, completely without warning. Dutch Mantell has been in the wrestling business for more than 40 years. He performed. He booked talent. He worked as a manager at the highest levels of WWE television, where he was known as the character Zeb Colter. That is who Dutch Mantell is. A man with more than 4 decades of experience in the wrestling business. Flair did not call him Dutch Mantell. He called him Zeb Colter. He used the character name instead of the real one. That is not a slip. That is a message. By calling him by his TV character name, Flair was saying that the real man is so irrelevant that he does not even deserve to be addressed by his real name. The character is all he amounts to. That is the dismissal built into the choice of words before he even got to the actual attack. Then came the attack itself. Flair went after Mantell's health. He pointed out that Dutch had suffered serious health problems. He said that if he were in that position, he would keep his mouth shut. And then came the line that summed up his entire argument. He said that if you do not have a legacy in this business, you cannot talk about a legacy. That is Flair's philosophy made visible. Legacy is the price of admission. It is the qualification required before you are allowed to have an opinion on the wrestling business. Dutch Mantell, in Flair's judgment, has not paid enough of that price, so his voice does not count. Dutch Mantell responded on his own platform. He said Flair had lost his mind. That was the phrase he chose. Not angry, not insulted, just a man watching another man behave erratically and naming it plainly. The thing that makes this entry so revealing is the fact that it was unprompted. Flair did not need to go after Dutch Mantell that day. No one put him up to it. He simply felt it and said it. That is the pattern. When something is sitting in his chest, it comes out. He does not manage it. He does not calculate it. He releases it. Moving to number 9 on the countdown. This is the bonus entry, Stevie Richards. Same appearance, same Ariel Helwani show in April 2026, right alongside the Dutch Mantel attack. Flair brought up Stevie Richards in the same breath. He struggled to place the name at first. He had to search for it briefly. That detail matters. Stevie Richards is not someone Flair carries around in his active thoughts. He's not a major figure in the landscape of Flair's grudges. He's not someone Flair has spent years fuming about. He just happened to be there in his mind at that moment, attached to some minor grievance. And Flair pulled the name out and used it. He called Richards a punk. Then he said it, the line that got repeated across wrestling websites and social media clips almost immediately. He said his little finger is bigger than Stevie Richards' neck. It was off the cuff. Said quickly, tossed out like a side note. And that is what made it so cutting. A prepared insult carries effort. An off-the-cuff insult carries contempt. When you dismiss someone that easily, without even needing to think about it, it tells them exactly where they rank. Stevie Richards did not take it quietly. He came back with a 34-minute video. 34 full minutes. He took apart every word Flair had said. He called Flair a senile, old, washed-up alcoholic, embarrassing himself weekly. Those are Richards' words. That is his claim. That is how he chose to respond. The response became a minor viral moment in wrestling circles. People watched it. People shared it. And here is the thing that stands out about that reaction. A throwaway comment from Ric Flair, made about a man whose name he had to search for, required 34 minutes to answer. That is the weight Flair carries even now. Even a careless insult from the Nature Boy demands a full rebuttal from the person on the receiving end. That is what his name still means in this business. Number 8 is Ludwig Kaiser. This is the most recent entry on the main 10, and it is the one that cost Flair his WrestleMania 42 seat. In April 2026, Flair confirmed publicly that he had been banned from attending WrestleMania 42. The reason was simple. He had directly threatened Ludwig Kaiser, a current WWE superstar and member of the stable Imperium, over a perceived slight directed at his daughter Charlotte Flair. The nature of the perceived slight is not detailed in what Flair shared publicly. What he made very clear is what he did about it. He called Kaiser, and he told him directly that when he saw him, he was going to beat the sight out of him. Kaiser took the threat to Triple H, who is Paul Levesque, WWE's chief content officer. Triple H acted on it. Flair's WrestleMania credentials were pulled. He was not allowed to go. Flair later offered something that resembled an apology, but that came after he had already gone public with his dismissal of Kaiser. He called Kaiser a 24-year-old English kid. That description is wrong in 2 specific ways. Kaiser is 35 years old, not 24, and he is German, not English. Flair had the nationality wrong and the age wrong. He did not check either fact before going public. He just said it. He also predicted that Kaiser would be a fly on the wall in a year. Another dismissal, another way of saying this person will be gone and forgotten, and it will not matter. Now consider what this episode actually shows. Flair is in his 70s. He is a retired performer. He has no current in-ring role. He is a legend in the fullest and most complete sense of that word. And when he believes someone has disrespected his daughter, his reaction is not a carefully worded statement. It is not a measured response through representatives. It is a direct phone call with a direct physical threat. Then, a public interview where he got the basic facts about the person wrong and did not care. No calculation, no filter. Just the same raw instinct that drove him through 4 decades of professional wrestling. Protect the family, protect the legacy, move fast, move loud, and deal with the consequences later. The WrestleMania ban was the consequence. He paid it, and he would almost certainly do the same thing again. Number 7 is Sid Vicious. Every other entry on this list involves something that happened in public, or something that ended up in public very quickly. A promo, a book, an interview, a phone call that got reported. This one started in private, and in some ways, that makes it different from everything else on the list. According to Flair, Sid Vicious was in a bar in England. He was talking to people. One of those people was Arn Anderson. And in that conversation, Sid was saying that Flair was simply too old to still be at the top of the card, that it was time for newer talent to be given that position, that Flair holding the top spot was past its natural end. This got back to Flair. He did not confront Sid publicly. He did not go on television and address it. He did not talk about it in an interview at the time. He went to WCW management and gave them a direct ultimatum: fire Sid or lose Flair. Those were the options. Pick one. That is not a conversation. That is leverage. Flair knew what his value was to the company. He used it without hesitation. The message underneath that ultimatum is clear. This man said, "I am too old." He said it behind my back to people I trust. That is not something I can share space with. Remove him or remove me. When both men ended up working in WCW together in the late 1990s, Flair described their entire interaction in one short phrase. A head nod, and that was it. No words, no acknowledgement, not even the surface level of a hello or a how are you. Just a head nod if their eyes happened to meet. And that was the entire relationship for however long they coexisted in that company. Ric Flair talks. He has always talked. The woo is just the opening. The man can fill a room with his voice, hold court for hours, command attention without effort. That is who he is. So, the decision to take all of that and reduce it to a single silent head nod for another person is not nothing. It is the maximum punishment Flair can deliver without using words. I see you. You mean nothing. That is all you get from me. Sid Vicious questioned whether Flair belonged at the top. Flair removed him from his world entirely, and by his own account, that never changed. Number 6 is Shane Douglas. In 1994, Shane Douglas stood in an ECW ring and threw down the NWA World Heavyweight Championship. He held it over his head and then dropped it. And while he did it, he declared that Ric Flair and everything Ric Flair represented was fraudulent, washed up garbage. It was a moment, a real moment. It launched ECW into another dimension of relevance. It made Shane Douglas into a name that people talked about. It worked exactly as intended, which was, without question, the entire point. Flair's response to that moment has remained perfectly consistent for 3 decades. He asks a question: who is Shane Douglas? He asks it as though he is genuinely unable to place the name, as if Douglas is so small, so inconsequential, that even locating him in memory is an effort not worth making. It is not a real question, it is a rhetorical weapon. By pretending he cannot remember who Douglas is, Flair is delivering a very specific message. What Douglas did not leave a mark. The career built on that moment amounts to nothing. The attack on Flair's legacy was so small that the man who made it cannot even be recalled clearly. Flair went on from there. He said he would not wrestle Shane Douglas for $1 million. He said Douglas had more heat with people in the wrestling business than anyone he had ever encountered in his entire life. Heat in wrestling means your reputation is damaged. People do not want to work with you. The business community does not trust you. He also mocked Douglas for reportedly working a retail job after his wrestling career ended. Whether accurate or not, Flair used that detail to underscore his verdict. This is where you end up when you build your career on attacking someone else's name. That is the lesson Flair draws from Shane Douglas. What Douglas did in 1994 was real. It resonated. But Flair never accepted it as a legitimate criticism of anything. He saw it as a cheap tactic, a stunt, a way to get ahead by using Flair's name as a stepping stone. And he has never, across 30 years and countless opportunities to soften, adjusted that view by a single degree. Number 5 is Vince Russo. Russo is 1/3 of what Flair calls the 3-headed monster. 3 men he holds directly responsible for the collapse of WCW. Jim Herd is one. Eric Bischoff is another. Russo is the third. Each of them damaged the company in their own way. Together, in Flair's view, they killed it. Russo's specific crime is ideological. He came in as a writer. He brought a philosophy of booking that put shock value above wrestling substance. He treated professional wrestling like scripted television drama, not a craft built by generations of people who had dedicated their lives to it. To Flair, that was not just bad business. It was an insult to the entire history of the business. The moment that made it permanent was a segment called the Flair Funeral. Russo put together a television segment in which Ric Flair was humiliated on screen, deliberately, in front of the audience, on the show that Flair had spent 25 years helping to build into something worth watching. Russo wrote that humiliation and put it on television. For a man whose identity is entirely wrapped in his legacy, public humiliation orchestrated by a writer who, in Flair's view, did not understand wrestling and did not respect the people who built it, is not something that fades. It sits. It stays. It does not get forgiven. Russo has said publicly that Flair is two-faced and a little crazy. He described Flair as someone who presents warmth to your face while working against you privately. The mutual distrust runs deep, and it has been expressed across many years and many platforms by both men. Flair's criticism of Russo is larger than personal animosity, though. He sees Russo as someone who did damage to the industry itself, not just to Flair, not just to WCW, to the whole industry. That makes the anger operate on a different scale. It is not just about what Russo did to him. It is about what Russo did to wrestling. Number 4 is Eric Bischoff. Flair has said, in plain terms, that his years under Eric Bischoff in WCW were the worst of his entire career. Not just difficult, not just frustrating, the worst. In a career that lasted more than 40 years, that is a statement that means something. Bischoff came from a television background. He took over WCW and built it into a genuine competitor to the WWF in the mid to late 1990s. During those same years, he systematically worked to push Flair out of the picture. Flair says Bischoff tried to lose him. That specific phrase, not just move him down the card, not just give him a smaller role, lose him, as if he was something to be quietly discarded. Despite 25 years of Flair being the absolute cornerstone of the company Bischoff was now running. The thing that made the Bischoff chapter different from anything else on this list is the psychological damage it caused. Flair said Bischoff beat his brains out. He was not talking about anything physical. He was talking about what sustained marginalization does to a person's sense of who they are. Bischoff questioned his relevance. He positioned Flair as yesterday's news. He chipped away at the confidence of a man whose entire identity was built on being the greatest performer in the world. When someone with actual power over your career does that to you, day after day, it leaves marks. Flair said it hurt his confidence. He said it was damage that did not fully heal. Bischoff sits on the three-headed monster list alongside Russo and Hurd. Flair holds all three of them responsible for WCW's death. For Bischoff specifically, the anger is about what was done to him personally, professionally, and psychologically during those years. And that anger, like everything else in Flair's ledger, has never been crossed out. Number 3 is Scott Steiner. This entry stands apart from most of the others because the loudest voice in it is not Flair's. It is Steiner's. The anger in this feud runs most strongly in Steiner's direction, while Flair has largely chosen to brush him off. But Flair brushing someone off, as we saw with Sid Vicious, is not the same as Flair forgiving them. Steiner's core accusation traces back to 1991. He and Flair had a match in WCW. Steiner claims that Flair deliberately buried him in that match. That Flair refused to do business fairly, that the result was manipulated to protect Flair's position and deny Steiner a title push that could have changed the entire direction of his career. Steiner argues that Flair used political influence backstage in WCW to systematically undermine talent he perceived as a threat to his spot at the top. He said Flair got people fired for personal reasons. He called him a jealous old bastard. He said you could not trust him. He flatly declared that Flair is not his friend. The most personal detail Steiner put out there is the claim that when he cut a direct promo on Flair in the locker room, Flair literally cried. Steiner told that story publicly and more than once. The purpose of it is specific. It is designed to peel back the bravado, to say that behind the robes and the confidence and the legend, there is someone who cannot handle being directly confronted and challenged. Someone fragile underneath all of it. What Steiner's accusations point to is a pattern that runs wider than just one match or one situation. Multiple people across WCW's history have made versions of the same claim. That Flair used his position and his influence to protect himself at the expense of younger talent who might otherwise have risen to challenge him. Steiner is the loudest voice in that group, but he is not the only one. Number 2 is Mick Foley. In 2004, Ric Flair published his autobiography. In it, he called Mick Foley a glorified stuntman. 3 words, and they set off one of the most bitter and widely covered real-life feuds in professional wrestling history. To understand why Flair said it, you need to understand how Flair sees the craft. He built his reputation on 60-minute Broadway matches, technical wrestling, the ability to hold a crowd through movement and timing and psychology alone, without relying on blood or dangerous falls or spectacle. That is what wrestling means to Flair. That is the definition. Foley's style sits completely outside that definition. The brawling, the hardcore matches, the falls from great heights, the blood, the chaos. In Flair's view, none of that is the craft of professional wrestling. It is spectacle. And calling someone a glorified stuntman is his way of saying your entire career is built on spectacle, not skill. He went further than the stuntman line. Flair accused Foley of spending his career sucking up to the writers instead of mastering the actual art of wrestling. That accusation is pointed in a particular direction. It says Foley got to where he got not through ability, but through relationships with the people who held the booking power. It questions the legitimacy of his success directly. The feud did not stay on paper. There was a backstage altercation. The situation reportedly came close to a lawsuit. All of it because of a few sentences in a book that Flair was not willing to take back. And here is the contradiction at the center of this entry. Flair has said clearly, more than once, that Mick Foley is genuinely one of the nicest people he has ever met. A good man, a kind man. He said Foley is the nicest guy in the world. Then he said Foley could not beat anybody if he actually had to. Both of those things are true, in Flair's view, at the same time. He likes the man. He does not respect the work. And he has never felt any need to keep the second opinion to himself just because the first one is warm. That combination of genuine personal warmth and complete professional contempt, expressed openly and without apology, tells you a great deal about how Flair operates. Number 1 on the countdown is Bret Hart. This rivalry has no single incident at its center. It is not one phone call or one segment or one book passage. It is a long, grinding, mutual dislike that has played out across decades of interviews, podcasts, television appearances, and autobiographies. 2 Hall of Famers, 2 legends of the business, and a sustained low-level hostility between them that has never been resolved. It started with a criticism. Bret Hart said publicly that Flair was repetitious in the ring. He accused Flair of running the same match, the same structure, the same blueprint, night after night. He did not say it quietly. He put it out there in interviews. Flair came back immediately. He pointed out that Bret's own celebrated finishing sequence, the set of moves that built toward the sharpshooter, amounted to 4 moves. He asked plainly, if that is not repetitious, what is? He was calling Hart a hypocrite. You are accusing me of the very thing you do yourself. That exchange is a genuine philosophical argument about wrestling. 2 men with strong opinions about what the craft requires, each finding fault with how the other approaches it. That part has some honesty to it, but the rivalry deepened past wrestling philosophy. When Owen Hart died, Bret went through a public period of grief, and then, in Flair's view, he shifted back to publicly relitigating the Montreal Screwjob, the 1997 incident where Bret was double-crossed in his final WWF match, a moment that Bret has spoken about many times across many years. Flair was disappointed. He said so clearly. Owen Hart had just died, a brother. And in Flair's view, Bret could not hold his focus on that loss before returning to a professional grievance from years earlier. Flair found that unbecoming. That is the word his framing reaches toward. It speaks to something below the wrestling philosophy, something about character. The public back and forth has continued for years. Neither man has offered the other a meaningful gesture toward peace. Neither has softened his language when the other's name comes up. There is no resolution here. There is no ending that is headed toward forgiveness. What this rivalry reveals more than any other entry on the list is Flair's need to always have the last word. When Hart criticizes him, Flair does not absorb it and move on. He finds the sharpest available counter and delivers it. He keeps the argument alive because letting it go would feel like conceding, and Ric Flair does not concede. Now look at the full picture. 10 names, plus 1 bonus, stretching from 1991 all the way to April 2026. A bar in England, a locker room argument, a page in a book, a television segment designed to humiliate, an executive who wanted to call him Spartacus, a writer who put him in a funeral segment on his own show, a phone call that got him banned from the biggest event of the year. Every single grudge preserved exactly as it was at the moment it was created. No softening, no time-based erosion, no point at which Flair decided that enough years had passed and the score could be cleared. Jim Herd is still the dumbest son of a bitch he ever met. That verdict has not shifted by a single word in more than 30 years. Shane Douglas threw down that title in 1994. 3 decades later, the answer is still, who is Shane Douglas? Dutch Mantell got attacked on a live interview in April 2026. Nobody asked Flair to go after him. Nobody prompted it. The thought was there, and so it came out. Ludwig Kaiser made one perceived slight about Charlotte and received a direct physical threat from a man in his 70s who then got those basic facts wrong on a public platform and still did not back down. The woo is the sound everybody remembers. The 16 world titles are real. The Hall of Fame induction is real. The 4 decades of matches that defined careers and shaped the entire industry are real. That part of the legacy is completely genuine. But behind all of it is a man with a running ledger. A ledger that never closes. A ledger where every entry, whether written 35 years ago or 35 days ago, stays exactly where it was placed. The Nature Boy keeps score. He has always kept score. He will keep score until the very end. That is Ric Flair. The whole picture, the legend and the list, the robe and the record, the woo and the shadow it casts.
He goes, I was just thinking about, what we need to do for your comeback. And I was kind of like almost offended. Like, man, I almost got paralyzed. And you're asking me to you know, get ready to come back into the ring.
He makes me sick might sound like just another wrestling insult, but with Steve Austin, some grudges ran so deep that they followed people for years. Stone Cold was one of the biggest stars the business has ever seen. He helped change wrestling forever, and nobody can take that away from him. Yet behind the curtain, there was a colder side to the man. The story we want to start with did not even happen in a ring. It happened on a podcast in 2015, long after Austin had stopped wrestling. A joke went too far, a phone call was made, and a beloved legend lost more than his pride. And if this story already has you picking a side, use the hype feature and give this video some hype, because Austin's coldest grudges only get darker from here. For now, just hold that thought. A podcast joke turning into a real business problem tells you something important. It tells you that Austin's anger did not fade when the bell stopped ringing. It tells you that, even retired, he still had the power to end things for people he felt had crossed him. We will come back to that podcast soon. But first, we need to understand the man, because to understand his grudges, you have to understand what he was protecting. Steve Austin became the face of a huge shift in wrestling. His character did not respect bosses, rules, or authority of any kind. He drank beer, he flipped people off, and he gave his employer the finger on live television. Fans loved it. They had never seen anything like him. He helped turn the company into a global force, and for a few short years, he was the most popular wrestler on the planet. That is not opinion, that is history. But the man behind Stone Cold was not the same as the wild rebel on screen. His real name was Stephen James Williams, and Stephen James Williams was careful. He was careful with his body, he was careful with his money, he was careful with his image, and most of all, he was careful with the Stone Cold brand. That brand was worth a fortune, and he guarded it like a man guarding gold. In this era, drawing power meant creative power. The more tickets and shirts you sold, the more say you had backstage. Austin sold more than almost anyone. So when Austin spoke, the bosses listened. And when Austin decided he did not want to work with someone, that person's path often closed for good. He called all of this business. Other people felt it as punishment. That is the heart of this story. Austin saw himself as a man protecting what he had built. The people he froze out saw a man who never forgave, never forgot, and never let go. The truth probably sits somewhere in the middle. But the more you look at his grudges, the more you see one cold habit repeating again and again. Once Austin felt crossed, the door was almost always shut. Think about what that protection really meant. To protect his body, he had to decide who was safe to trust in the ring. To protect his money, he had to decide who was good for the brand and who was not. To protect his image, he had to decide whose words and actions he could allow near his name. In each case, Austin was the judge. He held the power, and he used it. For the wrestler on the other side, there was no appeal. If Austin decided you were a risk, your hopes could end with a single phone call. That is a lot of power for one man to hold, and Austin held it without flinching. There is a fine line between protecting yourself and punishing others, and Austin walked right along that line for years. Sometimes, he was clearly in the right. Sometimes, the people he froze out had only made a small mistake, but the outcome was often the same: a cold silence, a closed door, and a career left to drift. As we count these grudges down, watch how often a fair point led to a cruel result. That gap between a reason and a result is where the darker side of Stone Cold lives. So let us count them down. 10 wrestlers who got on the wrong side of Stone Cold. 10 men he could not or would not forgive. We will start high and work our way down to the one that hurt the most. We begin at number 10 with the man from that podcast. Number 10 is Roddy Piper. Roddy Piper was one of the most loved characters wrestling ever produced. He was loud, funny, and clever on the microphone, and fans adored him for decades. By 2015, both he and Austin had long retired from the ring. They were legends living off their names and their stories. They were not rivals anymore. They were two old hands from the same world. That is what makes this one sting. Piper hosted his own podcast on a network called Podcast One. Austin hosted a show on the very same network. So they were not just old colleagues, they were business neighbors, sharing the same platform. On one episode of his show, Piper brought on a comedian called Will Sasso. Sasso did an impression of Austin, and the impression was not gentle. During the show, the jokes turned personal. They poked at Austin's past. They made fun of his old domestic abuse case with his former wife, Deborah. They mocked the way he had walked out on the company more than once. They joked about his ties to the people who ran the business. These were not light digs at his wrestling. They were jokes about the most sensitive parts of his life. There was something else too. The episode was advertised in a way that made it sound like the real Steve Austin might appear as a guest. He did not. He had nothing to do with it. To Austin, that felt like a trick that used his name to pull in listeners. He saw it as a deception that could harm his reputation. Austin did not laugh it off. He picked up the phone and called the president of Podcast One directly. He complained and he complained hard. The network acted fast. The episode was pulled. Just like that, Piper's show was censored over jokes told on his own program. Piper was furious. He felt silenced. He took the full, uncut episode and posted it for free on another site for anyone to hear. Then he told the world that Austin had got him fired. From his side, an old friend had used his power to shut him up. It did not stop there. Around the same time, the company moved away from Piper's Legends deal. That deal had given him merchandise and on-screen appearances. The timing was hard to ignore. The business chose to protect its golden relationship with Austin, and Piper was the one left out in the cold. Sadly, Piper passed away not long after, in July 2015, with the bad feeling between them never fully healed. Now think about the framing. Austin had a fair point. The jokes were cruel and personal. The fake advert was unfair. He had every right to be upset. But look at what he did with that anger. He did not just call Piper and sort it out man to man. He went straight to the top and made the whole thing vanish. And a legend lost his deals in the fallout. This is the modern proof. Austin's grudges did not stay inside the ropes. Years after retirement, his image was still something he would burn bridges to protect. That sets the tone for everything else on this list. Now let us drop down to number 9. Number 9 is Billy Gunn. Billy Gunn looked like a star. He was tall, he was strong, and he had the body of a leading man. The company saw all of that and tried to push him to the top. In 1999, he won the King of the Ring tournament, which was meant to be a stepping stone to bigger things. They gave him a new singles run and a brash new character, hoping he would become a main event name. It did not work out. A big part of that was The Rock. On a Sunday night show, The Rock cut a series of sharp, funny promos that tore Billy Gunn apart. The Rock told the crowd, in his own clever way, that everyone thought Gunn simply was not good enough. The jokes stuck, the fans laughed along, and Gunn's serious push lost all its steam almost overnight. But the crowd was not the only problem for Billy Gunn. Backstage, Austin felt the same way many top stars did. He thought Gunn was limited. He believed that, for all his size and look, Gunn struggled to deliver strong, believable matches when the lights were brightest. In the high-pressure spots near the top of the card, Austin did not trust him to carry the load. That alone might have meant a cold professional distance. But there was more, and this is the part that really set Austin off. Years later, Gunn and his tag team partner, Road Dogg, spoke in interviews about the Stone Cold Stunner. The Stunner was Austin's finishing move, and one of the most famous moves in the whole business. The pair suggested that they deserved the real credit for making it so popular. They argued that their big, dramatic bumps and the way they sold the move were what made fans love it so much. To Austin, this was the wrong thing to say to the wrong man. He took pride in his rough, realistic, brawling style. He believed his character and his work were why the Stunner caught fire. Hearing two men claim a share of that credit felt like an insult. It felt arrogant. It felt like they were chipping away at something he had built with his own sweat. So the gap between them grew wider and stayed that way. There was no big fight, no famous backstage row. There did not need to be. Austin simply held that cold distance, the same way he always did. And the lesson here is sharp. Even selling his finisher the right way was not enough. The moment someone tried to take a piece of the Stone Cold machine, even a small piece, Austin pulled away for good. His pride in his own popularity left no room for sharing. It is worth pausing on how small this slight really was. Gunn did not injure Austin. He did not insult his family or threaten his money. He simply claimed a share of credit for a move. To most people, that would barely register. To Austin, it was enough to keep a man at arm's length for good. That tells you how tightly he held the Stone Cold name. Anything tied to it, even the smallest piece, was his alone. He had built it, and he would not let anyone chip away at the story of how it was built. That brings us to number 8. Number 8 is Steve Williams, the man known as Dr. Death. This grudge starts with a strange twist of names. Austin's real name, remember, was Stephen James Williams. But there was already a famous wrestler called Steve Williams in the business. That man went by Dr. Death. He was known across the world as one of the toughest, hardest men in the sport. He was a legitimate brawler with a fearsome name. Because of him, young Stephen James Williams could not use his own name. Promoters made him take a new one to avoid confusion. That is how he became Steve Austin in the first place. He did not love the change at the time. So before these two men ever clashed, their names were already tangled together. One Steve Williams had to give up his name because the other Steve Williams already owned it. Years later, their paths crossed again inside the company. In the summer of 1998, a writer came up with a wild idea called the Brawl for All. It was a real fighting tournament, not a scripted match. match. The wrestlers would actually punch and grapple for real, and the winner would earn true toughness in the eyes of the fans. The plan was for Dr. Death to win it. He was the favorite, backed strongly by the head of talent relations. The idea was to build him up as a real hard man, then send him into a big money feud with Austin. On paper, it sounded smart. A legitimate tough guy, proven in a real fight, stepping up to challenge the top star. But real fighting does not follow a script. In the second round, a mid-card tag wrestler called Bart Gunn knocked Dr. Death out cold. Williams also tore his hamstring in the process. In a few short, brutal moments, his whole aura of being unbeatable was gone. The tournament itself was a disaster for the company. It cost a fortune to run, with payouts climbing into huge numbers, and it brought almost nothing back. Worse, it broke the very man it was meant to build, and Austin, who had always doubted the whole idea, now had all the reason he needed. His logic was cold and simple. If a mid-card tag wrestler like Bart Gunn could knock Dr. Death out in a real fight, then Dr. Death was no threat at all. How could fans believe this man could challenge Stone Cold when they had just watched him get flattened on live television? In Austin's eyes, the value was gone. One bad night had wiped it all away, so Austin refused to work with him. The big money feud, the whole reason for the tournament, was scrapped for good. Dr. Death's run with the company never recovered. In here you see Austin's hard edge in full. A long career and a feared name meant nothing once the magic was broken. Austin did not care about the years of toughness behind the man. He cared only about what fans believed right now. And right now, they had seen Dr. Death fall. That was enough for Austin to close the door. Now we reach number 7. Number 7 is Scott Hall. Scott Hall was a gifted performer and a huge name. He had helped change the business as part of a famous group of rule breakers. So when he returned to the company in early 2002, it should have been a special moment. He was booked to face Austin at the biggest show of the year. On paper, it was a dream match between two stars from different worlds. It did not turn out that way. Hall was going through a very hard time in his personal life. He was battling serious struggles and was in poor shape, both in body and mind. Everyone close to the situation could see it. He was not the same performer he had once been, and a match at the top of the card asks for everything a man has. The build to the match and the match itself both suffered. The bout was short, lasting less than 10 minutes. It leaned heavily on outside help, with Hall's friend Kevin Nash getting involved to prop the whole thing up. To Austin, it felt like Hall was simply coasting. He felt that Hall was not ready to perform at the elite level the moment demanded. This landed even harder because of where Austin was in his own life. He was deep in his own frustration. He was unhappy with the creative direction of the company. He was also living with serious neck pain that never really left him. For a man in that state, every big match mattered. A spot at the top of the biggest show was precious. It was a premium payday and a rare chance to shine. So when the match fell flat, Austin took it personally. He felt the whole thing had been wasted. A huge stage, a famous opponent, and it amounted to a short, messy fight that relied on interference. To Austin, that was money and a moment thrown away. He blamed Hall for how poorly it had gone. Hall was let go by the company soon after. The relationship between the two men stayed sour. Now, you can understand Austin's side. He wanted a great match. He wanted his opponent ready and sharp. Those are fair things to want, but look closer and you see that same lack of patience. Hall was a man clearly fighting his own demons. He needed help, not judgment. Austin saw only a partner who had failed his private test. There was no room for mercy. Once Hall let him down in the ring, the warmth was gone. And that is the sad part of this one. Hall was not careless. He was not lazy. He was a man struggling badly with his own life, and it showed in his work. A kinder view might have offered him patience and support. Austin offered neither. To him, the match was the only thing that counted, and the match had failed. He did not seem to ask why Hall had fallen short. He only saw that he had. In Austin's world, your reasons did not matter once the result was poor. The standard was the standard, and Hall had missed it. That leads us to number 6. Number 6 is Marc Mero. This grudge is one of the coldest because it was almost pure business. There was no botched move, no cruel joke, and no real fight gone wrong. There was only money and credibility, and Austin valued both above almost everything. In 1996, Marc Mero signed a strong contract with the company. It came with a guaranteed payment that was higher than what many respected veterans were earning. Word of that deal spread through the locker room, and it caused real resentment. Austin was one of those who felt it. At that time, he was working himself to the bone to become the top draw in the whole company. To see a newer man handed such a rich deal did not sit well. But money alone was not what broke Mero. The real damage came from a storyline with his own wife. Mero was paired on screen with his real-life wife, Sable. As the weeks went by, Sable became very popular. In fact, she became more popular than Mero himself. The crowd cheered for her, not him. Sensing this, the creative team booked a moment where Sable hit Mero with a powerbomb, a move where she lifted and dropped him on his back. It got a big reaction. Fans loved seeing Sable shine. But for Mero, it was career poison. He had just been physically dominated on television by a much smaller woman, and Austin saw it happen. Right after that broadcast, Austin acted. He called the boss directly. His argument was sharp and clear. He said that if Mero had just been powerbombed and beaten by a small female manager, then Mero no longer looked like a serious threat. How could fans take him seriously as a top challenger after that? In Austin's view, the credibility was gone, so Austin refused to work a major title program with him. He said that doing so would hurt his own standing and weaken the value of his championship run. With that one phone call, Mero's hopes at the top fell apart. His big chance was over, and his run with the company never recovered. Number 5 is Ahmed Johnson. This one is heavy, and it must be told with care. Ahmed Johnson arrived in the company in late 1995, around the same time as Austin. He was a powerhouse, big and strong, and he was pushed hard and fast, but he quickly rubbed many of his fellow wrestlers the wrong way. His in-ring style was stiff, meaning his moves often hurt his opponents for real, and his manner backstage was seen as difficult. That friction was bad enough on its own, but the real break came from a serious accusation. Johnson publicly claimed that Austin held racial bias against him. He said that, from the way Austin treated him backstage, he came to believe Austin was racist. It is important to be clear here. This was an allegation made by Johnson. It was not proven. Austin denied it firmly. So did others. A respected commentator who knew them both denied it. And so did many veterans in the locker room. They all rejected the claim and stood against it. We are not stating it as fact. We are telling you what Johnson alleged and how strongly Austin and others pushed back. What we can look at is how Austin responded. He was deeply offended. He guarded his public image and his personal honor very closely, and this accusation struck right at both. He did not brush it aside. In later interviews, Austin openly admitted that he strongly disliked Johnson. The two men kept apart. They avoided each other in the locker room. They avoided each other in the bookings. There was no working relationship, and no personal one either. It was a complete freeze. Of all the grudges on this list, this is one of the most bitter. There was no path back. The accusation cut too deep on one side, and the offense cut too deep on the other. And while Austin had every right to defend his name, the result was the same as always. He shut Johnson out fully, in his heart and in his work. Once the line was crossed, that was the end. For Austin, there was no talking it through, and no slow road to peace. The door simply closed and stayed closed. That brings us to number 4. Number 4 is Shawn Michaels. By the late 1990s, Shawn Michaels was one of the most talented men in the entire business. He led a popular group on screen, and backstage, he was part of a powerful circle of friends who held real influence. But Michaels also had a reputation. Many found him hard to deal with. He could be unprofessional. His attitude rubbed people the wrong way, and Austin was one of those people. A huge moment was coming. At the biggest show of 1998, Michaels was set to lose the top championship to Austin. This was meant to be the official launch of a brand new era, with Austin as its face. It was one of the most important nights in the company's history. Everything was riding on it, going smoothly. But Michaels was falling apart. He was carrying a serious back injury from a match earlier that year. He was also fighting heavy personal struggles. As the big night drew near, the mood backstage grew tense. Whispers spread that Michaels might refuse to lose the title. Some even feared he might not show up at all. With so much at stake, that fear was very real. The situation got so tense that another huge star stepped in. The Undertaker reportedly sat backstage near the entrance, taping up his fists. The message was clear. If Michaels did not do the right thing and lose to Austin as planned, there would be trouble waiting for him. That is how worried people were that Michaels might blow up the whole night. In the end, Michaels behaved. He went out, he wrestled, and he dropped the title to Austin as he was supposed to. The new era began, but Austin was still not happy. He did not like how the match came together. He was not pleased with its quality, and he had little time for Michaels' attitude through the whole build. After that, the two men barely had a relationship for years. The cold distance stretched on and on. They only made peace much later, when Michaels returned to the company in 2002 as a changed man. By then, a lot of time had passed. Now, you can see Austin's point. Michaels was a real risk on a vital night. Trusting him was hard, and Austin had reason to be wary. But look at the pattern again. Even after Michaels did the job and lost the title, Austin still held a grudge. Doing the right thing in the ring was not enough to earn his warmth. For Austin, respect seemed to mean total control, and anything less left a mark that lasted years. Now we reach number 3. Number 3 is Hulk Hogan. If Billy Gunn was about pride and Mero was about money, this one was about power. Hulk Hogan was the biggest name the business had ever known before Austin came along. He was a political giant backstage, a man used to getting his way, and Austin would not bow to him. The bad blood started years earlier in a rival company. Back then, Austin was a rising mid-card talent, sharp and athletic, with a different ring name. He was doing strong work and building himself up. Then Hogan arrived at that company in 1994, and everything shifted. Hogan brought huge political power with him. He looked after his own circle of older veterans first. Younger, hungrier workers like Austin were pushed aside to make room. Austin felt that shove. He felt marginalized, left out while the old guard took the top spots. It left a bitter taste. Later, when Austin moved on to another promotion, he did not hide it. He mocked Hogan in his promos, taking digs at the very man who had crowded him out. The story came full circle years later. Hogan returned to Austin's company in 2002 with a famous group of villains. The company saw a giant opportunity. They wanted to book Stone Cold against Hulk Hogan at the biggest show of the year. It was a true dream match. Two icons from two eras, the kind of clash fans talk about for life. It never happened. Both men refused to lose to the other. Neither would do the job. There was deep, old distrust between them, and too much pride on both sides. On top of that, Austin had his own worries about the match itself. He believed their styles would clash badly. He did not think the bout would meet his high standards, and he refused to be just another opponent for Hogan to stand across from. He would not play that role, so the dream died. Instead, Hogan faced The Rock in a famous match that fans loved, while Austin was placed in a shorter match lower down against Scott Hall, the one we spoke about earlier. The two icons never shared that ring. Here is the twist that makes this so telling. On screen, Austin was the great rebel who hated politics and stood against the powerful. But in this story, Austin played politics too. He protected his own spot. He guarded his own value. He refused to risk his standing for the good of the show. By doing so, he denied fans one of the biggest dream matches ever imagined. The anti-politics hero used the same political game he claimed to hate. The two men did patch things up later in life, but that dream match was gone forever. That leaves just 2. We are down to number 2. Number 2 is Jeff Jarrett. This grudge had 2 parts, and both cut deep. The first was about money. The second was about Austin's biggest payday of all. Together, they made for a freeze that lasted for years. The roots go back to Austin's early days in a small regional promotion in Memphis, run by Jeff Jarrett's father. Money was tight for young wrestlers there. Austin remembered opening a tiny pay packet in the locker room and feeling crushed by how little it held. As he sat there, dejected, a young Jeff Jarrett walked past and made a cutting remark. He told Austin that staring at it was not going to make it any bigger, then strolled away. That stung. Austin carried it for a decade. He came to see the Jarrett family as harsh promoters who made young talents scrape by on next to nothing while the family lived more comfortably. It was the kind of small, sharp memory that a proud man does not let go of, and Austin was nothing if not proud. The old grudge exploded in October 1997. Jarrett returned to the big company and wanted to make himself a hated villain fast. So he cut a promo, written with the help of a creative writer, that took aim at the hottest thing in wrestling. That hot thing was Austin's own catchphrase and merchandise, the famous Austin 316. Jarrett went on live television and called the Austin 316 gimmick blasphemous. He accused Austin of ripping off the Bible to put money in his own pocket. And here is the key part. Jarrett added that line without telling Austin first. He did not clear it. He just said it, on air, for everyone to hear. Austin was absolutely furious. And it was not only about pride. At that very moment, the Austin 316 shirt was becoming the best-selling item in the whole business. It was a goldmine. Austin feared that calling it blasphemous on television could spark a wave of anger from religious viewers. He worried that this backlash could harm his momentum and damage his biggest source of income. To him, Jarrett had just put his money in danger for a cheap promo line. When Jarrett came backstage, Austin was waiting. He confronted him face to face. By accounts, Austin's bald head turned blood red with rage as he let Jarrett have it, holding nothing back. The bad blood was now set in stone. The price came in 1999. The creative team pitched a top championship program between the two men. It would have lifted Jarrett to the main event, the highest level in the company, but Austin flatly refused to work with him. He would not do it. And because Austin's word carried so much weight, that was the end of it. Jarrett's rise was capped. Soon after, Jarrett left for a rival company, his big chance at that level gone. The freeze lasted a very long time. The two men only made peace many years later, in 2022, on Austin's own show. Think about what that means. A locker room comment from years before and a promo line on television were enough to make Austin block a man's career at the top level. This was not just hurt feelings, it was money, pride, and control all rolled into one. Austin did not forget, and for a very long time, he did not forgive. And now we reach the top of the list, the grudge that hurt the most. Number 1 is Owen Hart. This one is the heaviest of them all, and it must be handled with respect. There is no mockery here, only sadness. Owen Hart was a gifted and beloved wrestler from a famous wrestling family. He was known as a kind man and a brilliant talent. What happened between him and Austin was a tragedy, not a feud built on spite. It began at a major show in 1997, in a match for a championship. During the bout, Owen Hart went for a move called the Tombstone Piledriver. It is a move where one man holds the other upside down and drops to his knees. It must be done with great care, because the danger is huge. On this night, something went wrong. Owen dropped Austin straight onto his head. The result was severe. Austin suffered a bruised spinal cord. For a few terrifying moments, he was paralyzed. He could not move. He was lying in the middle of the ring, in front of a packed crowd, unable to feel his own body. It was one of the most frightening things that can happen to a wrestler. What happened next shows just how tough Austin was. Even in that state, he knew the match had to end. He managed to crawl across the mat and pull Owen into a weak roll-up to win, just as the script called for. He got the victory through sheer will, his body barely working, but the damage was done and it was permanent. That injury changed everything. It hurt his neck and spine in ways that never fully healed. It haunted the rest of his career. In the end, it helped force him into an early retirement in 2003. The biggest star in the business had his time at the top cut short, in part because of that one bad landing. Injuries happen in wrestling. Every man who steps in the ring knows the risk. So the break between Austin and Owen was not really about the botched move itself. It was about what came after. In this business, there is an unwritten rule. If you injure a colleague, you show deep regret. You reach out again and again. You stay close through the recovery, and you keep saying sorry. By the accounts of those who knew them, Owen did not do enough of that. It is said he reached out only once, on the night it happened, and little after that. Now, many believe Owen was simply crushed by shame. He had nearly paralyzed the company's top star, a man he respected. He may have found it too painful to face. That is a gentle and very human reason. But Austin did not read it that way. He took the silence as a lack of respect. He saw it as a lack of care for what he had been through, and so the distance grew between them, and it never closed. Sadly, Owen Hart died in 1999 in a separate accident, with the rift still open. By some reports, Austin's resentment ran so deep that he did not attend Owen's funeral. This is where you must weigh both sides with an honest heart. Austin had every right to be hurt. He had been paralyzed in that ring. His career and his health were never the same. Anger was natural. Pain was natural. No one could blame him for being shaken. But the question this list keeps asking returns one final time. Should that pain have hardened into a freeze that lasted until the day Owen died? Was there no room, in all those months, for one act of forgiveness? We cannot know what was truly in Austin's heart, but the result speaks for itself. Even in grief, the door stayed shut. That is the full list. 10 men, 10 grudges, and one cold pattern running through them all. Austin did not lash out in wild anger. He simply removed people from his world and kept them out. That calm, lasting kind of grudge is in many ways harder than a loud one. A shouting match ends. A quiet freeze can last a lifetime. You could also say each grudge taught the locker room a lesson. Cross Austin once, and you saw what it cost. Hurt his body, and you were gone. Threaten his money, and you were gone. Touch his name, and you were gone. Over time, people learned where the lines were. In that way, his grudges did more than settle old scores. They warned everyone else to stay in line. Whether Austin meant it that way or not, the message landed all the same. There is a hard truth in all of this. Austin did not just survive the brutal politics of wrestling, he mastered them. He became one of the most powerful men in the business. And in doing so, he became something he once seemed to fight against. The great rebel who hated authority ended up holding more authority than almost anyone. The man who flipped off the bosses became a man whose word could end careers. That is the cold edge behind the legend. But let us end where we should. Austin's greatness is not in question. None of these grudges erase what he did. He changed wrestling. He pulled millions of new fans to the business. He gave the world a character so good that people still talk about him today, long after his last match. He earned every bit of his place at the top, and he earned it by never backing down. That, in the end, is the whole story in one line. Steve Austin became Stone Cold because he never backed down. He fought for his body, his money, and his name with everything he had, and that fire made him a legend. But behind the curtain, that same fire could harden into a grudge that lasted for years. The very strength that made him great was also the thing that made him almost impossible to cross. And perhaps that is the real price of becoming untouchable. To stay on top, you have to be willing to close the door. You have to be willing to lose friends to keep your place. And once Steve Austin closed that door, it rarely opened again. That was his strength and his cost, all in one. The Rock names 10 wrestlers he will never forgive. That is not just a catchy headline. When the biggest name in wrestling history comes back with real power. The Rock is a legend. He is a money magnet. He is the most successful crossover star wrestling has ever produced. His name alone sells tickets. His presence alone creates buzz. He is one of the greatest performers to ever step into a wrestling ring. But that greatness comes with a cost. And that cost is measured in grudges, resentment, and real-life heat that never fully goes away. In early 2024, The Rock returned to WWE. But this time, something was different. He was not just coming back as a performer. He had joined the TKO board of directors. He had corporate leverage that went beyond anything he had possessed before. He was not just a wrestler. He was not just a Hollywood star. He was now a board member with real power over the direction of the entire company. And he used that power to take exactly what he wanted. Cody Rhodes had done everything right. He had won back-to-back Royal Rumbles. The fans had chosen him clearly and loudly. The story was perfect. Cody was going to finish his father's story. He was going to face Roman Reigns at WrestleMania 40 for the championship. The narrative was set. The moment was his. Then, The Rock walked in and changed everything with one boardroom conversation. He pushed himself into the main event. He displaced Cody from the spot he had earned. He used his corporate position to override the fans' choice. The fans were furious. They rejected the move completely and loudly. Social media exploded with anger. Live crowds chanted for Cody. Even people wearing Rock merchandise were booing the decision. At the WrestleMania kickoff event in Las Vegas, tensions boiled over in front of cameras and the world. The Rock physically slapped Cody on stage. It was not scripted. It was real. Cody later told Ariel Helwani on the MMA Hour exactly how he felt about the whole situation. He said, "I'm not a fan of The Rock by any means. Not currently in this state." He did not hold back. He did not play corporate. He called out the hijacking for exactly what it was. He said it was self-serving. He said it happened at the expense of the full-time roster who had built the current boom period with their blood and sweat. If you are loving this deep dive into the real grudges behind the curtain, make sure you use the hype feature and give hype to this video. It helps us bring you more content like this. Now, Cody was not the only one speaking out against what The Rock was doing. Seth Rollins went even harder. He stood up for the entire locker room. He said what everyone else was thinking, but was too afraid to say out loud. He went on Raw and declared that the company had been doing just fine without The Rock. They had built this boom themselves. Then Rollins took it to another level entirely. He gave Rock a new nickname. He called him Diarrhea Dwayne on live television in front of millions of viewers. He mocked Rock's 21-minute Instagram rant. He said everything coming out of Rock's mouth had the consistency of wet baby poop. Rollins declared that Rock had not been cool in 20 years. He was living off past glory. He was using corporate power to insert himself where he did not belong. Rollins also pointed out the pattern. This was not new behavior. Rock had done this exact same thing before. A decade earlier, he had taken CM Punk's championship and main evented 2 consecutive WrestleManias against John Cena. Punk had been champion for 434 days. He had carried the company on his back. Then Rock showed up for a few months and took his spot. Now Rock was doing it again. Same power move, same corporate leverage, different victim. The fan backlash was so intense and so sustained that WWE had no choice. They had to pivot. They put Cody back in the main event where he belonged. He defeated Roman Reigns and won the championship. The fans got their moment. moment. But the damage was already done. The resentment was real. The grudges were formed. And everyone in that locker room saw exactly what The Rock was willing to do when he had enough power. This 2024 situation was not new. It was not a one-time thing. It was just the latest chapter in a 30-year pattern of behavior. The Rock has created real enemies throughout his entire career. He has burned bridges. He has stepped on people. He has used his leverage to take what he wants. Some of those grudges have healed over time. Money and professional necessity have forced reconciliation in some cases, but others never will heal. Some wounds are too deep. Some insults cut too hard. Some power moves are too blatant to forgive. This is the story of those feuds. This is the story of the 10 wrestlers who have felt the sting of The Rock's ego and power. This is the story of why some people will never forgive The Rock, no matter how much time passes or how much money gets made. So why does this keep happening? Why does The Rock keep making enemies every single time he comes back? The answer is not simple. It is rooted in power dynamics, money, and the fundamental structure of modern professional wrestling. It is about leverage. It is about ego. It is about the clash between full-time workers and part-time megastars. Professional wrestling has always had a clear divide. On one side, there are full-time wrestlers who work year-round without breaks. They take the bumps night after night. They travel constantly from city to city. They work house shows that nobody sees. They build the business week after week, show after show. They sacrifice their bodies, their time with family, and their personal lives. They are the foundation. They are the workers who keep the machine running. Then there are part-time megastars who show up a few times a year when it is convenient. They take the biggest spots at the biggest shows. They main event WrestleMania. They get the promotional push. They cut the big promos. They make the headlines. And then they leave with the biggest paychecks while everyone else goes back to work. The Rock became the ultimate part-time megastar in wrestling history. He achieved Hollywood success that no other wrestler had ever reached before. He became a legitimate movie star. He became one of the highest paid actors in the world. He transcended wrestling completely. That success gave him absolute leverage over WWE. When he comes back now, WWE needs him far more than he needs WWE. He can dictate his terms. He can choose his spots. He can decide who he works with and what stories he tells. He has creative control. He has schedule control. He has power that no other performer possesses. That creates massive resentment in the locker room. The full-time roster sees a guy who left the business years ago. They see him come back and immediately take their spots at the biggest shows. They see him get special treatment that nobody else gets. They see him bypass all the normal rules and protocols. They see him operate outside the hierarchy that everyone else has to follow. He doesn't have to earn anything anymore. He just takes it because he has the power to do so. The Rock also weaponizes shoot promos in ways that other performers cannot. When you have enough power and enough leverage, you can go off script without consequences. You can bury people on live television. You can say things that damage their brand and their credibility. You can cut promos that feel real because they are real. And the people on the receiving end cannot respond in kind because they do not have the same leverage. They are restricted by creative. They have to follow the script. They have to play by the rules. Rock does not. Kevin Nash learned this the hard way when Rock destroyed him with the big daddy bitch line. Nash could not respond because he was told to stay on script. John Cena learned it when Rock buried him as a homeless Power Ranger, and Cena had to eat it. The power imbalance makes the conflicts feel more personal and more painful. The other factor that always comes into play is money. These feuds might be real, the heat might be genuine, the resentment might run deep. But at the end of the day, professional wrestling is a business built on making money. Personal grudges get put aside when millions of pounds are on the line. Promoters know this. Performers know this. Everyone knows this. The Rock versus John Cena sold over 3 million pay-per-view buys across 3 consecutive WrestleManias. That kind of money makes people cooperate. It makes them shake hands backstage. It makes them work together professionally even when they genuinely dislike each other personally. It makes them put aside their pride and their ego because the financial incentive is too strong to resist. So the pattern repeats itself over and over. The Rock returns with massive leverage. He uses that leverage to take what he wants. The locker room resents him for it. Tensions build. Shoot promos fly back and forth. The heat becomes real. Then money and business necessity force everyone to make peace and move forward. Some feuds heal completely over time. Others just become professional truces where people tolerate each other. And a few never heal at all. The wounds are too deep. The insults were too personal. The power moves were too blatant. Those grudges become permanent. Now let us look at the 10 wrestlers who have felt the sting of The Rock's power the hardest. Some of these these stories will surprise you, some will shock you, all of them are completely real. These are not works. These are not storylines designed for television. These are genuine backstage conflicts that shaped careers and changed relationships forever. Cody Rhodes represents the modern version of this exact problem playing out in real time. He had done everything right according to the traditional wrestling playbook. He left WWE when he was not being used properly. He built himself up in the independent scene. He helped create All Elite Wrestling and became one of their top stars. Then he made the decision to come back to WWE to finish his father's story. He won consecutive Royal Rumbles in back-to-back years. The fans had chosen him clearly and loudly at both events. The story was absolutely perfect. Cody finishing his legendary father Dusty Rhodes' legacy by winning the WWE Championship. The narrative was emotional. The journey was real. The fans were completely invested. But The Rock had other plans entirely. When Rock joined the TKO board of directors, he immediately used that position to insert himself into the WrestleMania 40 main event. He leveraged his corporate power to displace Cody from the match against Roman Reigns. Cody had earned that spot through 2 Royal Rumble victories. He had earned it through years of hard work. He had earned it by leaving and coming back and rebuilding trust. Rock took it with one boardroom conversation and one corporate maneuver. The fans rejected this decision completely and loudly. They chanted for Cody at every single show. They booed The Rock despite his legendary status. Even people wearing Rock merchandise, people who had supported him for decades, were chanting for Cody instead. This completely confused Rock. He could not understand why his own fans were turning on him. He could not comprehend why people would choose Cody over him. At the kickoff event in Las Vegas, Rock physically slapped Cody on stage in front of cameras and fans. It was a power move designed to assert dominance and put Cody in his place. It was Rock showing everyone who had the real power, but it backfired completely. The fans rallied behind Cody even harder. Cody went on the MMA Hour with Ariel Helwani and said something shocking for someone in his position. He said, "I'm not a fan of The Rock by any means, not currently in this state." He pulled back the corporate curtain completely. He said the hijacking felt self-serving and opportunistic. He said it came at the direct expense of the full-time roster who had built the current boom period with their work. He pointed out that Rock had done nothing to contribute to the current success. The backlash forced WWE to change course completely. They put Cody back in the main event where he belonged. He won the championship. He got his moment. But the relationship between Cody and Rock remains cold to this day. They work together professionally when business requires it. They cooperate on shows and in segments. But the personal dislike is absolutely real. Cody will never forget how Rock tried to steal his moment using corporate power. And Rock will never forget how the fans chose Cody over him despite everything he had done for the business. This feud showed something important. Even The Rock's power has limits when the fans speak loudly enough. Even corporate leverage has to bend when the audience rejects something that strongly, but the resentment lingers like a stain that will not wash out. The grudge remains real, and Cody Rhodes has every reason to never forgive The Rock for what he tried to do. Seth Rollins took it even further than Cody did. He became the voice of the entire locker room during the 2024 controversy. He said what other wrestlers were thinking, but were too afraid to say out loud because of corporate politics. When Rock inserted himself into WrestleMania 40, using his board position, Rollins went on Raw and cut a promo that was clearly coming from a real place. He said WWE was just fine without The Rock. He pointed out that the full-time roster had built the company's current success without any help from Rock at all. Rock had been gone. The entire business had thrived. They did not need him coming back and taking spots from people who had earned them. Then Rollins gave Rock a nickname that would stick in people's minds. He called him Diarrhea Dwayne on live television in front of millions of viewers around the world. He mocked Rock's 21-minute Instagram rant where Rock tried to justify his corporate power move. Rollins said, "I think I'm going to call The Rock. How about Diarrhea Dwayne? He's been running his mouth and every single thing that comes out of his mouth has the consistency of wet baby poop." The line was absolutely brutal. It was designed to cut through Rock's carefully crafted public image. It was designed to humiliate him. Rollins also pointed out the historical pattern of this behavior. He reminded everyone that Rock had done this exact same thing before. 10 years earlier, Rock had returned and taken CM Punk's championship after Punk's historic 434-day reign. Then, Rock main evented 2 consecutive WrestleManias against John Cena while Punk was pushed aside. Now, Rock was doing it again to Cody. Same playbook, same corporate leverage, different victim. Rollins called it gross. He said it was what happens when powerful people abuse their power and their position. He said they think they can do whatever they want want and get away with it because of who they are. Backstage, Rollins represented genuine resentment from the entire roster. The locker room felt that Rock was using his boardroom position for selfish creative bookings that benefited only himself. They felt he was taking opportunities away from people who deserved them. Despite the real tension and genuine anger, Rollins operated professionally when it mattered. He played his role in the WrestleMania 40 main event storyline. He sold the story. He did his job. But the words he said on television came from a completely real place. The criticism was genuine and heartfelt. The frustration was authentic and justified. Rollins knows that wrestling is a business first and foremost. He knows that sometimes you have to work with people you do not respect or like. But he made absolutely sure everyone knew exactly how he felt before he played his part. And those feelings have not changed since. WWE was just fine without The Rock. The locker room had built the current boom period themselves, and when Rock came back with corporate power, he tried to take credit and opportunities that did not belong to him. Seth Rollins will not forget that. He made sure the fans would not forget it either. And he made sure Rock knows exactly what the full-time roster thinks of his part-time power moves. John Cena's feud with The Rock is arguably the most famous and most profitable on this entire list. It started in 2008, when Cena criticized Rock in a radio interview that got widespread attention. Cena said Rock used wrestling as nothing more than a stepping stone to launch his Hollywood career. He said Rock claimed to love the business deeply, but only made satellite appearances from his mansion. He accused Rock of relying on catchphrases and nostalgia instead of showing up physically to support the active roster who were there every single week. The criticism was harsh and public, and it stung Rock deeply. When Rock returned in 2011, that real-life tension became the entire foundation for a massive 3-year program that would make both men millions. They main evented WrestleManias 27, 28, and 29 in consecutive years. The promos were intensely personal. The insults were brutal and crossed lines. Rock called Cena a homeless Power Ranger in one of the most memorable insults in wrestling history. He said even the good Lord cannot save Cena from what was coming in the ring. They felt real because they came from real resentment. Cena fired back during a live confrontation with genuine anger in his voice. He demanded, "Who in the hell are you to judge me?" It was Cena standing up for himself and the full-time roster. The heat between them was absolutely real, and everyone backstage knew it. Backstage, the environment was incredibly tense and uncomfortable for everyone around them. The turning point that made things truly ugly came during a Raw promo that people still talk about today. Cena went completely off script in front of millions of viewers. He pointed out that Rock had promo notes written on his wrist. This was a massive violation in wrestling culture. Exposing another performer's preparation is considered one of the absolute worst things you can do to a fellow professional. It breaks trust completely. Rock was visibly furious on camera. Former WWE writer Brian Gewirtz later confirmed that Cena's move severely violated Rock's trust and damaged their relationship. The two nearly came to physical blows backstage during WrestleMania season. Communication broke down completely between them. They could barely look at each other. At WrestleMania 28, Cena was booked to lose cleanly to Rock in the main event. Referee Mike Chioda later revealed that Cena was legitimately upset about the finish. Cena felt he was working year-round, carrying the company on his back, and did not deserve to lose to a part-time star who was primarily living in Hollywood and making movies. It felt like a slap in the face to his work ethic. After the match, they shared a professional hug for the cameras, but backstage, the resentment remained strong and real. Then something changed. After 2015, Cena transitioned to his own part-time Hollywood schedule. He started making movies himself. He experienced firsthand the physical demands and mental pressure of a top-tier acting career. Cena publicly apologized to Rock in interviews. He admitted his previous criticisms came from complete ignorance. He said he did not understand how difficult it was until he walked that same path himself. Today, Cena and Rock are genuinely good friends. They have completely reconciled. The grudge is gone. The heat is resolved. But for years, it was very real. The wrist note incident left deep scars, and it took Cena literally walking in Rock's shoes to finally understand his perspective. This feud generated over 3 million pay-per-view buys across 3 WrestleManias. It made both men millions of pounds. In the end, money, time, and mutual respect healed the wounds. But it took a very long time, and it required real personal growth and empathy from both sides to get there. CM Punk's issue with The Rock was entirely structural. Punk had been WWE champion for 434 days. He was the longest reigning champion of the modern era. He carried the company as a full-time performer. He worked every show. He sold tickets. He built storylines. Then, The Rock returned in 2013. He won the championship at the Royal Rumble. This was done specifically to set up Rock versus John Cena at WrestleMania 29. Punk's historic reign ended so a part-time star could take the title. Punk was vocal about his frustration. He despised part-time stars taking marquee positions. He believed the full-time roster deserved those spots. During their on-screen segments, the promos had a real competitive edge. Rock publicly attacked Punk's credibility. He called Punk delusional. He dismissed him as the biggest jerk the world has ever seen. During a Raw confrontation, Rock cut Punk off repeatedly. He said, after hearing CM Punk speak, it is crystal clear that he is straight up delusional. Then, Rock delivered his signature line. He told Punk, "It doesn't matter if you matter." It was designed to delegitimize the reigning champion. It was Rock asserting that his star power was bigger than Punk's title reign. Punk understood the business. He knew this was the plan, but that did not make it easier to accept. He had worked year-round. He had built the championship's credibility. Then, Rock showed up for a few months and took it all away. The resentment was real. The frustration was genuine. But unlike some of the other feuds on this list, this one eventually healed. Punk and Rock resolved their issues privately. They exchanged text messages years later. They established mutual respect. Punk understood that Rock was doing what the company asked. Rock understood that Punk had legitimate grievances. Today, there is no heat between them. But at the time, the conflict was very real. It represented the fundamental tension between full-time workers and part-time stars. Punk carried the load. Rock reaped the rewards. And for a while, that created genuine bad blood. The fact that they reconciled shows maturity on both sides. But it also shows that some grudges can heal when both people are willing to communicate. Not all of Rock's feuds ended this way, but this one did. And that makes it one of the rare success stories on this list. Shawn Michaels' feud with The Rock goes back further than most people realize. It started before Rock even became a professional wrestler. As a teenager in Hawaii, Rock witnessed Michaels disrespecting his grandmother, Leah Mavia. She was coordinating a show for Polynesian Pacific Pro Wrestling. Michaels behaved rudely towards her. Rock never forgot that. When Rock arrived in WWE in 1996, that resentment was already there, and it only got worse. Michaels was part of the Clique. This was a political faction that included Triple H, Kevin Nash, and others. They had massive backstage power. They saw Rocky Maivia as a threat to Triple H's rise. So Michaels actively lobbied Vince McMahon to derail Rock's momentum. Michaels tried to convince McMahon to have Bret Hart win the Intercontinental Championship from Rock. Hart refused. He recognized Rock's potential. He requested a disqualification finish instead to protect Rock's standing. Hart acted as a mentor. Michaels acted as a saboteur. The physical confrontation came in 1999. Michaels executed a stiff superkick on Rock during a SmackDown segment. Rock confronted him backstage about the excessive force. Michaels responded with arrogance. He said, "If you can't take it, you shouldn't be in this business." That was the wrong thing to say. Rock immediately tackled Michaels to the dressing room floor. They had to be separated. Rocky Johnson, Rock's father, later confirmed the incident. He said, "Next thing you know, he's on the floor and Dwayne is on top of him." After that, Rock refused to ever work a program with Michaels. When Michaels returned to full-time action in 2002, WWE pitched several matches. Rock turned them all down. He would not work with Michaels. The dream match never happened. Years later, they reconciled professionally. They developed mutual respect, but the damage was done. One of the biggest matches in wrestling history never took place because of real-life heat. Rock even satirized the backstage sabotage on his television series Young Rock. The character Chad Frost was clearly based on Shawn Michaels. It was Rock's way of telling the story without naming names. Today, there is no active grudge, but the dream match is gone forever. And it all started because a teenager in Hawaii saw Michaels disrespect his grandmother. Some things you never forget. Some grudges leave permanent scars, and some opportunities once lost never come back. Triple H's rivalry with The Rock is one of the most complex relationships in wrestling history. It started in 1997 when both were competing for mid-card dominance. They were fighting over the Intercontinental Championship. The competition was fierce. The dislike was genuine. Triple H later said on WWE Rivals, "From the very beginning, I didn't like him, and I don't think he liked me." That mutual animosity shaped everything that followed. Triple H was part of the Clique. He had political power. He used it to try to bury Rock. During live promos, Triple H would go off script. He would try to make Rock look bad. He would try to derail Rock's momentum. Rock followed the script until Bruce Pritchard told him to fight back. Once Rock started going off script too, his superior charisma dominated. The Clique also subjected Rock to backstage harassment. The most disturbing incident involved someone placing feces in Rock's food box. This was designed to provoke a reaction that would get Rock fired. It was vicious, it was personal, and it showed how far some people would go to protect their positions. The creative handling of their rivalry made things worse. At WrestleMania 2000, WWE booked a convoluted four-way match instead of a clean singles bout. The match had a McMahon in every corner storyline. Vince McMahon turned on Rock to let Triple H retain the championship. It was frustrating booking, and it reflected the intense backstage politics of the era. Over the years, both men achieved massive success. They both became executives. Triple H runs creative. Rock sits on the TKO board. They had to establish a professional truce. The corporate structure demanded it, but the dynamic remains complex. Triple H does not have the same creative control over Rock that he has over other talent. Rock operates outside the normal hierarchy. He answers to the board, not to Triple H. So, while they work together professionally, the relationship is not warm. It is not friendly. It is a business arrangement. The genuine dislike from 1997 has evolved into corporate coexistence. But make no mistake, the tension is still there. It is just buried under layers of corporate professionalism. They tolerate each other because the business requires it, not because they want to. And that underlying friction will probably never fully disappear. Some rivalries are too deep, some grudges are too old, and some relationships are forever defined by where they started. Triple H and The Rock started with genuine dislike, and that foundation never truly goes away. Randy Orton's heat with The Rock came from a single radio interview. In June 2011, Orton appeared on 98 KUPD in Phoenix. He was asked about Rock's return. Orton did not hold back. He said John Cena was 10 times the performer in the ring that Rock was. He pointed out that Cena had wrestled thousands of matches. Rock had wrestled none in 7 years. Orton accused Rock of lying to fans. Rock had promised he would never go away again. But he only appeared via satellite. He used teleprompters. He relied on writers. Orton's key quote was, "I'm over the bitterness, but I believe that John Cena is better than The Rock." It was a direct shot. It was public, and it infuriated Rock. Rock immediately called WWE corporate. He complained to the office. John Laurinaitis, the vice president of talent relations, pulled Orton aside backstage. Laurinaitis told Orton that Vince McMahon was upset. He said burying a WrestleMania headliner right before the event was unprofessional. Orton eventually smoothed things over with Triple H backstage. But Rock never directly confronted him. Instead, Rock maintained a cold, professional distance. They later did a brief Raw segment together. Rock treated Orton like a young upstart who needed to be put in his place. The real-life tension was integrated into the programming, but it was never fully addressed. Today they have professional alignment. They work together when needed. There is mutual respect on the surface, but the warmth is not there. The relationship remains distant. Orton spoke his mind in that radio interview. He represented what many in the locker room felt. Rock was getting special treatment. He was not putting in the work. He was taking spots from people who were there every week. Orton said it publicly, and Rock never forgot. The grudge is not as intense as some others on this list, but it remains very real. But it is real. It is there, and it defines how they interact to this day. Some things you can apologize for, some things you can walk back. But when you publicly say someone is not as good as their rival, that sticks. That becomes part of the permanent record, and it changes the relationship forever. Kevin Nash's feud with The Rock was all about ego and microphone dominance. Nash had made comments during his WCW days. He claimed he would easily destroy Rock on the mic if they were ever in the same company. Nash was confident. He thought his cool persona would dominate. When the NWO arrived in WWE in 2002, Nash got his chance. But Rock struck first. On the Raw, after WrestleMania 18, Rock went completely off script. During a live segment, he delivered a devastating line. Nash's character was Big Daddy Cool. Rock turned it into an insult. He said, "Big Daddy Cool, The Rock's us," more like "Big Daddy Bitch." The line destroyed Nash. He was caught off guard, and because of creative restrictions, he could not respond. The writing team had told him to stay on script, so he just had to stand there and take it. Rock had used his leverage to humiliate Nash on live television. Nash felt the insult severely damaged his character. It made him look weak. It made him look like he could not hang with Rock verbally. The backstage fallout was tense. In subsequent multi-man matches, both men took physical liberties with each other. They worked stiff. They sent messages through their work. Nash never let it go. In later shoot interviews, he took personal shots at Rock. He questioned Rock's marriage. He questioned his authenticity. He said Rock's success was mostly due to Steve Austin's neck injury creating an opening. Nash tried to diminish diminish Rock's accomplishments. He tried to rewrite history. It was bitter, it was petty, and it showed that the grudge was real. This feud never healed. There was no reconciliation. There was no mutual respect developed over time. Nash remained bitter. Rock moved on, but the distance between them is permanent. Nash learned a hard lesson. When you talk about dominating someone on the microphone, make sure you can back it up, because Rock backed it up. He went off script and buried Nash in front of millions of people, and Nash never recovered from it. That is the power of leverage. That is what happens when one person has creative freedom and the other does not. And that is why Kevin Nash will never forgive The Rock for making him look like Big Daddy Bitch. Goldberg's conflict with The Rock was about brand clash and creative mismatch. Rock had personally lobbied to bring Goldberg into WWE. He wanted a marquee feud, but the creative execution exposed real problems. Rock adopted his Hollywood heel persona for the build. He used rock concert segments to mock Goldberg. He brought out Gilberg, a parody character, to humiliate Goldberg on live television. During one promo, Rock delivered a memorable line. He said, "You don't want to wait to get your ass whooped at Sunday at Backlash. Bring your wasted biscuit monkey ass in here." It was entertaining, but it deconstructed Goldberg's serious WCW aura. At Backlash 2003 in Atlanta, something shocking happened. Atlanta was Goldberg's home territory. It was WCW's stronghold. The crowd should have supported him. Instead, they booed Goldberg. They cheered for heel Rock. Rock's charisma had completely flipped the dynamic. Backstage, Goldberg struggled with WWE's style. In WCW, he was booked to dominate quickly. In WWE, babyfaces had to sell. They had to absorb punishment for long periods. Goldberg hated this. He had backstage outbursts about the booking. He did not understand why he had to make people look good. This frustration contributed to his decision to leave. After 1 year, Goldberg rejected contract extensions. He walked away from WWE. The relationship with Rock was part of the problem. Rock had satirized him. Rock had exposed the limits of his character, and Goldberg never fully adjusted to WWE's ecosystem. Today, there is ongoing professional distance. They are not friendly. They do not seek each other out. The respect is minimal. Goldberg probably feels Rock undermined him. Rock probably feels Goldberg could not handle the business. Neither is entirely wrong. This was a case of two massive egos and two different philosophies colliding. WCW's Goldberg did not fit WWE's system, and Rock's role in that mismatch left permanent tension. Some wrestlers adapt, some do not. Goldberg did not, and his brief, uncomfortable run included a feud with Rock that neither man looks back on fondly. The grudge is not explosive, but it is there, and it will probably never fully resolve. Ahmed Johnson's feud with The Rock is the ugliest story on this list. It involves a backstage fight and controversial accusations. In late 1997, Rock turned heel and joined the Nation of Domination. This effectively replaced Ahmed Johnson in the faction. Ahmed was then positioned as Rock's on-screen rival. Before a scheduled match, they argued about the layout. Rock did not want to do Ahmed's high spots. Ahmed refused to do Rock's sequences. The argument escalated. Ahmed later recalled, "He was getting a little too cocky for me. It was a few blows thrown." They had a physical fight backstage. Nation of Domination members Ron Simmons and Charles Wright broke it up. The fight was real. The animosity was genuine, but it got worse. Years later, Ahmed did shoot interviews. He made bizarre and controversial claims. He said he overheard Triple H and Shawn Michaels making racist jokes. He claimed Rock told them he was not black and was the product of an affair. This claim was widely dismissed. Rock's father was Rocky Johnson, a legendary black Canadian wrestler. The story made no sense. Ahmed's credibility was already damaged. He had a history of backstage volatility. He once got into a fight with D'Lo Brown and was choked out. His controversial statements alienated him from the wrestling community. Ahmed left WWE and never came back. Today, there is mutual lifelong animosity. Rock has never addressed Ahmed's claims publicly. There is no reason to. The accusations are absurd, but the backstage fight was real. The tension over replacing Ahmed in the Nation was real, and Ahmed's bitterness is clearly real. This feud represents the dark side of 1990s locker room culture. Performers were territorial. They protected their spots aggressively, and when someone felt disrespected, it could turn physical quickly. Ahmed Johnson felt Rock was too cocky. Rock felt Ahmed was difficult to work with. They fought, and they never made peace. Some grudges are too toxic to heal. Some accusations are too outrageous to address, and some people just need to stay far apart. Ahmed Johnson and The Rock fall into that category. The distance is permanent. The animosity is forever, and there is no path to reconciliation. So, what do all these stories tell us when we look at them together as a pattern? They reveal something very clear and very consistent. The Rock's power creates enemies wherever he goes. His leverage allows him to to take whatever he wants whenever he wants it. His part-time status generates deep resentment among full-time workers, and his willingness to use shoot promos as weapons makes the conflicts intensely personal and difficult to forgive. But the story is far more complex than just saying Rock is the bad guy and leaving it at that. He operates in a system that actively rewards his behavior. WWE needs him desperately. Fans want to see him perform, and when he returns to the company, everyone bends to accommodate him because of the money he brings. That is not entirely his fault. It is the fundamental nature of the business. It is how star power works in entertainment. The full-time wrestlers absolutely have legitimate grievances that deserve to be heard. They work year-round without breaks. They build the business show after show. They sacrifice their bodies and their families. Then, a part-time star shows up and takes their spot at the biggest show of the year. That frustration is completely understandable and justified. Any reasonable person would feel the same way in that situation, but they also benefit financially from Rock's returns, even if they do not want to admit it. The shows draw bigger audiences, the pay-per-views sell more buys, the media coverage increases. Everyone makes more money when Rock is involved in the product. So, the resentment exists right alongside the financial incentive. They hate what he does, but they benefit from it happening. Most of these feuds eventually found some form of resolution over time. Cena and Rock became genuine friends after Cena walked in Rock's shoes. Punk and Rock made peace through private text messages. Michaels and Rock developed professional respect after years of distance. Triple H and Rock established a corporate truce because the business demanded it. Even Cody and Rock work together when business requires them to cooperate. Professional necessity forces people to move forward, but some grudges never heal no matter how much time passes. Nash remains bitter decades later. Goldberg keeps his distance permanently, and Ahmed Johnson's animosity is so toxic it will last forever. Some wounds are simply too deep to close. The pattern will almost certainly repeat itself in the future. The Rock will return again at some point. He will use his leverage to get what he wants. The locker room will resent him for it. Shoot promos will fly back and forth. The fans will either support it or reject it. Then, money will force professional cooperation regardless of personal feelings. It is the never-ending cycle of modern wrestling where part-time stars have tremendous power and full-time workers have justified pride, and the collision between those two forces creates genuine conflict every single time. But here is the truth that matters most when everything else is stripped away. The Rock is still a generational star who transcends the business. He is still the biggest name wrestling has ever produced by any measure. He is still a money magnet who draws attention and media coverage wherever he goes. He is still must-see television when he appears. People still want to see him perform. Companies still need him desperately. And wrestlers still work with him because the business absolutely demands it regardless of personal feelings. Some will never forgive him for the power moves he has made. Some will never forget the slights and the insults and the opportunities stolen. Some will carry grudges until the day they die. But they will work with him anyway when the company asks them to. Because in professional wrestling, personal feelings always take a backseat to financial reality. The show must go on no matter what. The money must be made above all else. And The Rock, for better or worse, remains the biggest draw in the history of the entire business. Nobody else comes close. That is his power. That is his powerful legacy in the business. And that is why, even with all these grudges and all this legitimate heat, The Rock will always have a place in wrestling for as long as he wants it. Because when it comes to making money and drawing crowds and creating mainstream attention, it genuinely does not matter what anyone thinks or feels about him personally. What matters is what The Rock delivers to the bottom line. And he has been delivering that for 30 straight years without fail. Some wrestlers will never forgive him for what he has done. They will carry that resentment forever, but they will always work with him when the money is right. Because that is the business. That is the brutal reality. And that is the economics of being The Rock. He is too big to cancel, too valuable to ignore, too profitable to keep away, so the grudges remain. The heat stays real, but business continues regardless. And The Rock keeps winning because winning is what he does best.